My testimony this morning is on saving Kenny, and it's about the importance of evangelism. God asks us time and time again to trust Him, to give it all to Him. After my mother's death in 2012, I made a commitment to God to turn the difficulties in my life into opportunities to be a better witness for Him. Many of you know that my older brother Kenny passed away suddenly and unexpectedly in December of 2015. Even though I am still overwhelmingly sad and heartbroken that my brother is no longer with us, I am continuously praising God because I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that Kenny is in heaven, that he's dancing in the glorious gardens of heaven with my mother, that he's tending to his fields of iris and daylilies. He's playing his guitar. He's painting ceramics. He's making jalapeno relish with his homegrown peppers. And he's running and playing with his dogs, Jake and Fred and Merlin. How do I know this? I know this because I personally witnessed his salvation on February the 8th of 2012. As our mother was transitioning from this world to heaven in the ICU at Mission Hospital in Asheville. On that day, as Mother was taking her final breaths, Cy was witnessing to Kenny on the phone. Just a few moments after she passed, Cy was kneeling at her bedside with his hand on her shoulder and praying the prayer of salvation with Kenny on the phone. The timing of this and the sequence of events is nothing short of a miracle. I am convinced that my mother was not going to leave this earth until she knew that all three of her children were saved. On the previous day, my family had gathered in my mother's hospital room, surrounding her and holding hands, to pray and to say goodbye to her before making a final decision to stop treatment for the pneumonia that had consumed her body. Kenny said that during that time, he saw Jesus sitting in the chair in the corner of the room, waiting for us to release our mother to Him. I take great peace and comfort in knowing that Kenny now celebrates Christmas and Easter in heaven with our parents and our risen Savior. Kenny made a lot of mistakes in his life, and he made some very poor choices. But the one thing he did right, the most important thing he did in his 64 years on this earth, was accepting the gift of Jesus Christ and accepting His invitation to become a child of God. In Matthew 28, Jesus gives us the Great Commission. Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw Him, they worshipped Him, but some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age." When we read this passage, we often think that we cannot possibly fulfill this command, because we can't go to Africa or Southeast Asia or South America or Haiti or Mexico to spread His word. But you don't have to go very far to be a witness for Christ. Each of us can probably name at least 5 people that we know who may not know Him. We know that only Jesus can save them, but we can be His hands and His feet to draw them closer to Him and open their hearts to His gift of salvation. I believe, without exception, that each of us is called by Jesus Christ to reach out to others and tell the story of His mercy and His saving grace. Silence is incompatible with Christian teaching. God gave us a voice. God expects our voice to be used to speak His truth and His love. And don't be afraid to talk loud. God has turned my personal tragedy and personal loss into an awesome opportunity to be His witness. My message to each of you today: if you have family members or friends and you know that they are not saved, or you don't know whether they are saved and you truly care about their salvation, do not wait. Do whatever you can to bring them to Jesus. Don't assume that they are already saved. Don't wait for the right time to witness to them. Don't wait for somebody else to do it. Do it now. You may not have another chance.
Amen.
Good morning. Because we all know that I'm a crazy dog lady, I'm going to stand up here and talk about my dogs for a minute. I've had dogs for my entire life, since I was a little kid, all the way up through adulthood. Even when we moved overseas, I made sure that I found the local neighborhood dogs and befriended them. You can pretty much guarantee if there's a dog anywhere, I will find it. So I always knew that my life trajectory would involve working with dogs somehow, but I wasn't sure exactly how that was going to play out. I knew I didn't want to be a professional trainer, and I thought about being a vet tech for about 5 seconds before I remembered that needles and blood make me pass out. So ultimately, I got a normal job doing project management and just spent my free time volunteering, fostering, working with local rescues. In fact, back in 2013, I was in the process of adopting a pit bull, and I wasn't able to find any rental companies that would rent to us. And so, because I am a proud pity parent, I actually went ahead and bought my own house so that I could have the dog I wanted. Yes, I am the crazy dog lady that buys houses for her dogs. So that itch, though, that I had, that I needed to keep helping, that I needed to do more, continued to stay with me. And as my Chihuahua, Jose, began to creep up in years, I started noticing that there was an epidemic of senior dogs being abandoned in local shelters. And I also started noticing how few rescues were willing to take on the challenge of caring for an aging dog. And that itch started turning into something kind of like a plan. Unfortunately, as often happens when we start trying to follow God's will, there are powers that do not want us to be successful in that. And right around the time I started thinking that this was something I really wanted to pursue, I wound up going through a particularly difficult time in my life. I became depressed. I wasn't interested in pursuing anything. I wasn't interested in getting out of bed, much less trying to do what it was that God wanted me to do. And so, being that dogs were what I always came back to, I knew that what I needed to do was try to find a dog that needed some help, and helping that dog, it would give me something to strive for. So in April of last year, I walked into Fulton County Animal Shelter and said, "Show me the most broken, the most banged up, the oldest, ugliest, most unwanted dog you had." And this was who they showed me. His name is Joey, and you can't see very well in this picture, but he was almost completely naked. He was a chow mix who had no hair, and his nails curled up into his paw pads. He was deaf. He was grouchy. He hated everybody and everything, and was just miserable, cowering in the back of a little cage where no one was ever going to see him or ever going to want him. And I said, "Yep, that's the one. Give me that one, please." And so I took Joey home. And over the next several months of helping rehabilitate Joey, taking him to multiple vet visits, determining that he had bacterial skin infections, fungal skin infections, chronic ear infections. I mean, he had been hit by a car, you name it, this dog had it. He was just so messed up. And over the months of taking care of him, it really helped bring me back to who I was and what I needed to accomplish and what I knew that God wanted me to do. And that was helping save old dogs. I have kind of come to realize over this journey that there's a problem in this country with how we treat old things, old dogs and old people both. And many of the old dogs that wind up in shelters are there because their elderly owners could no longer take care of them. They had to go into assisted living, even passed away. And instead of respecting the bonds that these people shared with their beloved companions, what happens is that more often than not, they wind up dumped in a shelter like trash. So in December of last year, I founded Old Dog Home, which is a small nonprofit sanctuary that's dedicated to old dogs. As much as it may be a cliche, I believe that in order to make a change in the world, you have to be the change. And as my favorite cross-stitch sampler taught me as a kid, if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. So I did it myself, and I set up the rescue. Now you might be wondering why we're talking about this in church today. Loving dogs is hardly a Christian ministry. But one thing that I've learned over the past few months since I founded the rescue is how many doors can be opened just by loving dogs. As Pastor Si mentioned a few weeks ago, we do have a general Christian duty to care for the needs of our animals, but I believe it goes beyond even that. By caring for these old dogs, God has enabled me to care for people as well, the helpless and the hopeless, literally. Just this past week, we heard from a friend of a friend about a woman who was going through a difficult time. She was being foreclosed on at her home and being evicted. And she had several dogs that she didn't know what to do with. She had friends who were helping her find a place to stay, but she wasn't able to take the dogs with her. And so her greatest fear was what was going to happen to these companions of hers. So Old Dog Home and several other rescues all stepped up to each take one or two of the dogs. I spent this past Tuesday at 11 o'clock at night sitting with her, hugging her, holding her, loving on her, and promising her that no matter what happened, I would take care of her dogs and make sure that they would be okay, so that she could focus on what she needed to do to take care of herself without having to worry about that. So obviously I can't fix everything that's wrong in the world, but I can be sure to show some of God's grace to a person that is hurting and struggling. And if it wasn't for Old Dog Home, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to even know about this, let alone be there and be part of helping in this situation. So yeah, I am a crazy dog lady, and I'm okay with that. One of my favorite verses is 1 Corinthians 9:22, and in one translation that reads, "I try to find common ground with everyone, doing everything I can to save some." Sometimes the common ground we find is that we love dogs. Sometimes that common ground might be music, sports, movies, all sorts of things that we can be passionate about that we can use as an entryway to being where people need us to be. God can take these passions that we have, even things that are not typically Christian passions, and use those to help others. There are all kinds of people in all walks of life who need help and grace, and Christians need to be the ones who are there stepping into these situations. We can't do that if we're sequestered in our churches. So no, it's not a Christian ministry technically, but I'm going to go right ahead and save and take care of these old dogs. And in the meantime, I'll be watching and waiting for the ways that God is going to move and show me how I can use this passion to help save some people too. Just to wrap up, this is Joey today on the right-hand side. You can't see again very well, but we call him, as opposed to Naked Bear Dog, when we first got him, he's now Fluffy Bear Dog because he has hair out till here and looks like an actual beautiful, gorgeous chow now. And, you know, you can say that I saved him, but I like to think that he saved me just as much back. Thank you.
I just asked Barbara to turn off the light so I can see. I don't care what's up here. That is a picture of my late husband, Lynn, and my two grandchildren, grandson and granddaughter. The title that I was given is Saving Myself. And it doesn't mean being saved with Jesus as my Savior and knowing that I will be in heaven someday with Lynn. It's saving myself after something horrible happened in my life. It was one of the most shocking. I was not prepared for it when my husband died in August of 2017. It was one of the most devastating moments of my life. Philippians 4 reads, "Be careful in nothing, but in everything by prayer, let your request be made known unto God. This is what I had to do. I could not have made it without God in my life and the friends of Trinity and my other friends, but mostly God just brought a calmness over me, and he prepared the way for me. Being in shock, you really do not think very clearly. I was in a daze 4 days. Thank goodness the funeral arrangements were made and everything was paid for, and I recommend wholeheartedly, if you have not lost someone very close to you like a spouse, that you prepare yourself before that day, because you do not think clearly. You're in that daze. So everything can be taken care of. My family and I only had to set the dates for the service and the funeral. I prayed that God would keep me strong and brave throughout this entire time. From Trinity, we had so much food. We had cards, had telephone calls, texts, visits, and most of all, prayers. Without that, we would have never gotten through all this. For 22 years, I had not lived alone in the home on Bridgewood Drive here in Conyers. I had not paid bills. I didn't even pump gas. I didn't get car tags. I didn't do oil changes. I didn't do the car inspections. You might think I was a little pampered. Well, I guess I was. This is when God took over in my life. I prayed all the time. The Bible verse that I kept praying and repeating over and over was Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ, who strengtheneth me. I prayed as I'd never prayed before. As I said, I was a Christian. From a young age, my parents were good old Southern Baptists. They went to church every time the door was open, so did I. But I had never needed God as much in my life as I did at this time. God kept me strong and guided me in doing things that I had never, ever done before. He guided me through paying the bills, finding all those passwords that I had no clue about, getting the car tags, the car inspection. He even led me to a realtor that was able to sell my house very quickly. He found me an apartment that was vacant, and I moved in there and put some of my furniture in storage. So I and my dog, Yukon, we moved twice in 1 year. Never, ever could I have done this without God in my life. The verse in Isaiah comes to mind, and I said it over and over also. Do not fear, for I am with you. I will hold your right hand, and I will guide you. So many times I remember asking God, please, God, just hold my hand. He carried me through this. And just like the poem of Footprints in the Sand, he even carried me many times when I could not have done it on my own. I know that many of you have gone through this kind of loss and what you have suffered. And many of you, when I started coming back to church, you gave me so many words of wisdom. I appreciate all you did and all your prayers. I can remember Joyce saying, it will get better, but it will never be the same. And it does get better. And I remember Winna told me that grief is like the waves. Some days the water is calm and you make it through just fine. Then there are days where the waves come rushing in to the shore and they knock you completely down. You have to deal with the ebb and flow of grief. There is no in-between. Special days like birthdays, anniversaries, Father's Day, Mother's Day, grandparents' lunch, and then going to our favorite Mexican restaurant that we went to almost every day, having to either go alone or with someone else. They are very difficult. That's when I pray even harder. But God has continued to be with me and given me strength. Stress comes from trying to do it all on our own. Peace comes from putting it all in God's hands. One night, a man had a dream. He dreamed that he was walking along the beach with the Lord. Across the sky flashed scenes from his life. For each scene, he noticed 2 sets of footprints in the sand, one belonging to him and the other belonging to the Lord. When the last scene of his life flashed before him, he looked back at the footprints in the sand. He noticed that many times along the path of his life, there was only 1 set of footprints. He also noticed that it happened at the very lowest and saddest times of his life. This really bothered him, and he questioned the Lord about it. Lord, you said that once I decided to follow you, you'd walk with me all the way. But I have noticed that during the most troublesome times in my life, there's only 1 set of footprints. I don't understand why I needed you most, you would leave me. The Lord replied, my son, my precious child, I love you and I would never leave you. During your time of trial and suffering, when you see only 1 set of footprints, it was then that I carried you.
When peace like